They called Calder Station's program the Resilience Standard, and after 40 days under it, I decided the name was accurate in exactly the way nobody intended. It was standard, in the sense that it never changed, and it tested nothing so much as a man's capacity to sit upright in a chair built for a different spine while strangers studied his face. The Threll ran the screening out of the station mess hall, because the mess hall had the only ceiling tall enough for their observation rig, and the only tables long enough to seat a full evaluation panel across from 6 human recruits at once. 3 afternoons a week we filed in, sat where we were told, and answered the same handful of questions in different orders, while sensors mounted above the salt and pepper shakers recorded what they called micro-expression drift. The Threll believed humans broke down in patterns. They had built an entire division to find the pattern. 40 days in, they hadn't found it, and that, more than anything, seemed to be what made senior evaluator Vren Kaselik angry. I brought Atlas to every session because the post-psych officer had cleared him as a morale control. Atlas being my dog, an 11-year-old Saint Bernard, the approximate size and temperament of a sofa that had decided, late in life, to also be a dog. He'd been with me since I was a corporal at a posting half a galaxy from here, where a quieter program had also tried, briefly, to find a use for him before giving up and settling for the truth. He was a very large, very calm animal who liked sitting near me and disliked almost nothing on principle. He slept through the screenings. Not dozed, slept, head heavy on my boot under the long table, jowls slack, snoring at a volume the Threll sensors had flagged twice as a possible structural fault in the station. I told them it was just Atlas. They wrote it down as an open question. The rest of the platoon had opinions about him, none of them unkind. Private Renner called him the station's ballast. Lynn, on the rare good days, brought him a strip of dried meat from her own ration and pretended not to notice when he ate it in one motion that didn't seem to involve chewing. Even the Threll lab technicians, the younger ones who weren't yet senior enough to pretend they found him irrelevant, had started timing their coffee breaks around the 89th minute, just to watch him wake up. The Threll had tried, the first week, to have him removed from the hall entirely. Kaselik called him an uncontrolled variable in the dataset. I told the panel that 180 pounds of dog who slept through their hardest test was data, and after some discussion well above my clearance, Atlas stayed. He became, without trying, the most consistent performer in the entire program. While 6 humans sat rigid through 90 minutes of repeated questioning, Atlas hit the same baseline every single time. Asleep by minute 4, awake somewhere around minute 89, tail giving one slow thump against the floor the moment I finally stood up to leave. It was on the 40th day that Kaselik decided the program needed a result. She had been running Private Soria Lynn hard for 3 sessions in a row. Lynn was 19, the newest in the platoon, sharp on paper and visibly fraying under the chair, the kind of fraying you learn to read in a recruit's shoulders long before it ever reaches the face. Kaselik had decided Lynn was close to whatever pattern she'd spent 40 days hunting for, and on the 40th day, she stopped asking the standard 12 questions and started asking different ones. About Lynn's family. About a posting where Lynn had lost a friend. Questions that weren't written into any approved protocol I had ever seen, and weren't, by any reading I could make of them, anything but cruelty with a clipboard attached. Lynn's hands had started shaking somewhere around question 6. By question 9 she had stopped answering altogether, just staring at the table, breathing in the careful, counted way people breathe when they are trying very hard not to do anything worse in front of an audience. Kaselik leaned forward, pale, patient, entirely without urgency, and asked the question again. I said her name wasn't on the approved list. Kaselik didn't look at me. I said it again, quieter, and reminded the room that the program charter required evaluators to stay within the 12-question standard. Kaselik informed me, without raising her voice, that exceeding the standard fell within her discretion as senior evaluator, and asked Lynn the question a 3rd time. That was when Atlas got up. He did it the way he did everything, slowly, with effort, like a structure settling. He came out from under the table, crossed the short distance to where Lynn sat with her hands locked together in her lap, and lay down across her feet, the whole considerable weight of him, chin resting on his own paws, eyes half shut and aimed not at Lynn but at Kaselik. He didn't growl. He didn't bare a tooth. He didn't so much as lift his head past that first settling sigh. He simply became, with no apparent effort at all, 180 pounds of dog that was no longer moving, planted between an evaluator and the recruit she had decided to break, and he looked at Kaselik with the flat, unbothered patience of something that had never once in its life needed to consider whether it could win an argument. Somewhere above the salt and pepper shakers, a sensor light went from green to amber and stayed there. Nobody on the panel reached for it. The two junior technicians by the coffee station had gone very still, the way people go still when they sense a room deciding something without them. The room went quiet in a way 40 days of screenings hadn't managed. Kaselik looked at the dog for a long 3 seconds. I watched her recalibrate something behind her eyes, not fear. Exactly. The Threll don't startle the way we do. Something closer to a system encountering data it had no category for. She had built a 40-day program to measure exactly how much pressure a human being could absorb before failing visibly, and the only creature in the room that had failed to react to any of it, under any conditions, across any session, was currently lying on the recruit's feet like a closed door. "Move the animal," Kaselik said. "He's asleep," I said. "He does that." He wasn't asleep. His eyes never left her once. Kaselik held the position a moment longer than I think she meant to, the way you hold a position after you've already lost the argument, and you're only delaying the part where everyone in the room finds out you know it. Then she sat back, closed her data slate with a small, precise click, and informed the panel, in the flattest voice I'd heard her use in 40 days, that today's session had reached its natural conclusion. Nobody asked what natural meant. Nobody needed to. Lynn didn't move for almost a minute after the panel filed out. Then she put one hand down, careful, the way you'd touch something you weren't entirely sure was real, and rested it on Atlas's shoulder. He thumped his tail once against the floor, the same slow thump he gave me at the end of every session, and went, this time for real, back to sleep. The resilience standard ran 3 more weeks after that, on paper. In practice, Kaselik stopped asking the questions that weren't on the list, and the panel stopped pretending the program's only stable result wasn't currently asleep under their own evaluation table. The final report, when it eventually came down through channels well above what I was cleared to read in full, apparently concluded that human resilience under sustained psychological pressure remained statistically inconsistent and difficult to predict across all observed subjects. It said nothing at all about the dog. I think that was the part that bothered the Threll the most, not that Atlas had ended it, but that there had never been anything to measure in him in the first place. He hadn't endured the pressure. He'd simply never once noticed it was there. The platoon never made a thing of it, not in the way you'd expect. Renner started leaving the door to the mess hall propped open on screening days, so Atlas could get in and out without anyone having to ask. Lynn still brings him the strip of dried meat, though now she does it openly, and the technicians still time their coffee breaks to the 89th minute, except now half of them bring their own dog's photographs to show me, like Atlas has become some kind of quiet authority on the subject of being unimpressed. I still walk him past the mess hall most evenings, out of habit more than anything. He still falls asleep before we've gone 20 feet. The Thrells still don't have a category for him, and watching him snore through another quiet Calder Station sunset, I've come around to thinking they never will.